hopefully you can hear me because I don't know. Okay, cool. So first of all, welcome. Thank you for coming to my session about ECharts. Today I'll be talking about saying goodbye to D3 and hello to ECharts. So a little bit about me before we get started. My name is Clement Ho. I am one of the front-end engineering managers at GitLab. I oversee the Monitor Health team, and I'm based in Austin, Texas, USA. We're known for multiple things. One of the things that you may not have heard about Austin is we have this bat bridge, so I wanted to add that picture there. And my Twitter handle is ClemMakesApps. So if you have any questions about what I'm talking about or want to see the slides at the end, I will be tweeting out those links later on. So if you're unfamiliar with GitLab, GitLab is a single application for the entire DevOps lifecycle. So we want to help you build your software faster by giving you all the tools. And so with that, I want to thank GitLab for the opportunity to speak here, as well as the conf for having me here. So what is D3? Who's familiar?
And can you hear me now? Now I have to switch back. Now I know who's not watching me, who's not seeing me, guys.
Okay. Raise your hand if you've heard of D3.
No, it's not working. We have to switch back. Mine is what?
I'm sorry. No worries. Is that good? Okay. Cool. So raise your hand if you heard of D3. Cool. A lot of people. Raise your hand if you're within. Good? All right. So it's good that most of you have heard of D3, but I'll go ahead and explain it real quick for those who haven't heard of it. So D3 stands for Data-Driven Documents. According to the website for D3, D3.js is a JavaScript library for manipulating documents based on data using HTML, SVG, and CSS. So that's a lot of words. So what does that really mean? You might be asking. Maybe some visualization, maybe some charts. But if we had to boil down D3, what it does is it takes your data and your configuration and passes it into D3, the library itself, and then outputs into the DOM your charting. So an example of D3 chart code could look something like this. You have your container for the chart as well as some JavaScript code. You take your data, your data code, and you pass in kind of how you want to set up your scales, and then you pass it directly to D3. It's very explicit. So that code would render something like this, a very simple linear scale chart, kind of what you would expect. D3 is also very powerful, has a lot of other tools. Examples include this really cool chart of the wind speeds in Tokyo, so you can map that visually. D3 also lets you do cool things like visualize spatial mapping. So this is an example where you can drill down kind of as the user progresses through the navigation. You can also do cool things like art. This is not really what you traditionally think about when you think about D3, but you can use it to visualize your data points so that you can create cool art. A lot of other companies also use D3. Very famous companies, New York Times, Datadog, Square, New Relic, Coinbase. These are all reputable companies, and this is just a very overview. A lot of companies use D3. But I'm here to tell you today that D3 is not for everyone. You might think that all the big companies are using it, so you should use it, but it may not be the right fit for you. D3 is very low level. As you saw earlier in the code, you have to call D3.select, D3.scale. You may not need that kind of granular control that D3 provides. So at GitLab, I said earlier I was over the monitor team. This is kind of the stages that we have in the company. For the specific monitor team, that I oversee, we have a specific goal. Our goal is to automatically monitor metrics so you know that any changes in code impacts your production environment. So that's kind of our main vision for our stage, for our product area at GitLab. So with that, we want to build really nice charts like this, where you can kind of monitor your Kubernetes cluster, notice how much core usage you're using with your pods, as well as your memory usage, so that you can get alerted whenever things go wrong. And we hope to replace other tools that you might be using at your company, like Grafana. So this is actually a screenshot from our own Grafana instance at GitLab that we hope to eventually replace. So as you can tell, Grafana has a lot of different chart visualizations. There's different line charts and little stats at the top. So for GitLab, we want to build all these kind of different tools to replace Grafana. We want to build heat maps, the single stat, area charts, line charts, column charts. And so there's a lot of scope there. And with the monitor stage, visualization helps us achieve our product vision of monitoring the metrics. But it's important to note that visualization is not our primary product. And so that's the key thing for us. We're not able to spend months building our own wrappers around D3. D3 being so low level and trying to create those abstractions for each of those chart types takes a long time. We want to have more product iteration, and we want to have more development velocity. And so those using the D3 route doesn't work for us. So to dive a little deeper about product iteration and development velocity, they're very big buzzwords kind of terms, is that we want to be fast at adapting our product to customers. So we don't want to spend a long time building D3 charts and then realize maybe the industry has it wrong. Maybe people don't want to monitor metrics. They don't want charts. Maybe they just want an animation to do something else. If we spend all that time building D3, we will never get to that point, and we'll lose our customers. We also, from a development engineering standpoint, want to keep shipping features at a fast rate so that we can keep up with our competitors and outpace them. Oh. So essentially, we needed a library that was flexible enough to run out of the box, give us a lot of the different chart types we're looking for, as well as allow us to customize when needed. Maybe certain styles to match our design system, or maybe a different chart type that nobody uses, nobody has created before that we need for our own situation. So we decided to investigate different libraries outside of D3. So based on the title of this talk, you'll know that we'll end up with ECharts. But I want to take you through our journey of how we evaluated the different charting libraries so that in case you need to evaluate these different tools, you're equipped to do so as well. So ChartJS was kind of one of the more popular open source charting libraries out there. It's very nice. It looks really pretty. One of the big downsides is they depend on Moment.js, which is quite a large library. But other than that, it works pretty good. So our evaluation was that it works great out of the box. It does all the line charts that you're looking for, the column charts, but they render directly to canvas, which, depending on your perspective, may be good or bad. For us, it was more difficult to customize because you have to kind of determine where to render your elements if you want to add more functionality to the charts. There's also potential problems with accessibility. So you could add an ARIA label to tell you the description of a chart, but if you're trying to monitor your Kubernetes cluster, you probably don't want it to read out all the data. Trying to figure out what's the best way to make it more accessible. Canvas definitely restricts your options. And in addition, it's also very difficult to add new charts because of Canvas. So ChartJS code is actually not too complicated. We took a look at it. You have your Canvas as your container, and then you call the ChartJS library, and you pass in a bunch of options as well as the data. So it looks more kind of like this. In D3, we're passing explicitly the configuration, but with ChartJS, we're actually passing the config to the library directly. And in my opinion, this encapsulated model is more maintainable. That's just my opinion. It might be different for each person, but it's easier to pass in one options rather than explicitly calling each function on D3, so that if you accidentally miss one, it's easier in the options file. So we also looked at Britecharts. Britecharts is a really cool library that's created by Eventbrite. They're a company that does ticket sales. They built this library on top of D3. So previously, ChartJS is kind of its own thing. Britecharts is built on top of D3. And so it kind of does kind of what we're looking for. It creates a wrapper around all the low-level functions so that we don't have to worry about that. When we investigated further, Britecharts had examples that fit our needs, but it started to hit performance issues once you had a lot of data points. And so that was a big drawback for us. But here's some examples of what Britecharts look like. So you can see it's a little bit more abstraction. You can call like is animated, aspect ratio. They're more easier to understand what options you can apply rather than in D3 where you have to set the scale and be very explicit about it. So overall, it was a better D3 abstraction, but it still wasn't great for our purposes because we had the performance issue and we wanted to scale well as well. So then next came ECharts. So ECharts, some background, is open source library, charting library specifically, and visualization that was actually created by a company in China called Baidu. And they're actually take ECharts to process the data, and then they have another open source library called zrender that actually renders out the data points to Canvas or to SVG. So for us, that was kind of a really good perspective. We could swap between the two if we needed to. We realized that SVG gives us potentially more options for accessibility, but Canvas might also be more performant. And this zrender library was very lightweight and effective. It could actually target older versions than IE11, which was quite amazing for us, as well as older Android phones. So ECharts is actually in the process of being incubated into the Apache Software Foundation. So they're in through that incubation process. So that's also another interesting data point about this library. So ECharts offered a lot of the features that we wanted. And it was very performant when we had large-scale data compared to the other libraries that we looked at. And so when we looked deeper into how ECharts works, this is a code snippet of a simple ECharts chart. So very similar to your ChartJS, you have your container, and then you pass in the options and the element to the library. This was kind of what we wanted to do, the approach that we preferred, and so it was a great move for us to adopt this. So when we finally decided this, we decided to land ECharts in GitLab in 11.6, which was December of last year. So you might be asking, what did we achieve in this time? So it's been about 8 months since then. What did we do? So here's a slide comparison. On the left side, we have the old D3 rendering of our metrics chart. And on the right side, we have where we are today. And so there are some UI improvements. We decided to change some of the design and how it looks. But overall, you can see that there's substantial improvement. The right side, you have this new scroll bar at the bottom that you can kind of drill into the data a little bit more. That would have been quite difficult and challenging to do on the D3. We also added the ability to scroll. I guess the animation's not pulling up on here very well. But basically, if you hover your mouse over one chart, it will hover over the other chart as well, so you can kind of see that parallel time in your charts. We also implemented column charts with a similar zooming scroll functionality, and a line chart, and a heat map chart. So all this in 8 months, not even with the full team, and there was about 3 to 4 people working on this. We also worked on other features during this time. So just based on this alone, we were able to get a lot more velocity, improve our product by using ECharts compared to if we decided to use D3. But nothing is perfect, and there are drawbacks. So I want to talk a little bit about the drawbacks of ECharts. First of all, the documentation could be improved. So ECharts, as I talked about earlier, was incubated out of Apache Software Foundation, but it was also started by a Chinese company. So a lot of the documentation was originally written in Chinese. And so some documentation was converted over to English. Some of the grammar is a little bit off. You can still kind of understand, but certain sections still haven't translated over. So that can be quite challenging at times. It can also be difficult to contribute effectively upstream. So it's easy to contribute if there's a typo, grammar mistake, but when you want to implement a new feature, a new chart type for ECharts, it's quite complex. This is the architecture diagram that ECharts provides. As you can see, there's a lot of different components going on. First, they create a model, and then they try to encode it, and then they pass it to zrender. So if you wanted to, let's say, add a new chart type, you have to follow this flow as well. So it's quite complex. And then test coverage. Test coverage is quite minimal at ECharts, unfortunately, and something I wish could be better. So here is Travis CI, what they use for ECharts. There's actually 2 jobs running in this Travis CI YAML file. Literally just JS hint, which is good. It ensures that the code is the same, looks the same throughout the project. But there's also another command here that's just building the project, which is good, but not really a test. So that's something that could be improved. In terms of advantages, I wanted to highlight a few as well. So overall, the charts are very reliable at ECharts. They have a really nice selection of examples on their website, from line charts all the way to scatter and so forth. These are great examples that you can view on your own computer without having to write any code. So that makes it very reliable and usable. The core team is also very friendly and genuinely wants the project to succeed. So earlier when we were evaluating this project, we actually reached out to the ECharts team and said, hey, we're evaluating you. At GitLab, we want to use you. Would you be willing to kind of start a conversation? Can we have a call and have ask questions? And so they were really, this is a screenshot from our Zoom call. It's not very flattering, but this is just showing you how willing they were to get on a call and actually collaborate with us and help us integrate this into our project, as well as help answer any questions that we had. And since the project is also under the incubation process, there's also mentoring by the incubation team, and that's been very good. So here's a screenshot of an email from the mailing list. It's concerns with the ECharts project, just trying to encourage the team to have more open communication in the mailing list. So this is a really good approach for this project moving forward, because a project that's successful in the open source world has to have a good community, and in order to do that, everyone has to be able to contribute. So by encouraging the team to have more conversations in the mailing list, it helps overall make a brighter future for ECharts. And so there's also other ways that the core team at ECharts is trying to grow their community. An example of this is recently they rolled out an ECharts cheat sheet. So one of the challenges is having so many different components with ECharts. You don't know what they're called, how to use them. So they actually built a website specifically so that you can learn about the different components to lower the bar for integrating with ECharts. So future goals of ECharts at GitLab. I've mentioned how we adopted ECharts the last 8 months and how we've progressed. Where do we want to go? So one of the things we want to do is replace all the existing charts at GitLab with ECharts. So it's not just the monitor team that has charts. There are other teams at GitLab that also have charts. Some of them are in D3, some of them are in ChartJS. So it's kind of fragmented, and it'd be nice to make everything cohesive with the design as well as with the technical debt. So an example of this is the burn down chart. So this is a screenshot of our burn down chart in GitLab where we can track how the issues are progressing over a milestone. You're just trying to see that issues are being closed as your milestone progresses. It's very great for product managers. But you can see, even in this implementation of D3, there are some weird bugs, like the green line going over the edge. That doesn't really make any sense. So stuff like that. So here is a mock-up of what it would look like with ECharts, an actual issue if you want to track it. One of the great things about GitLab being transparent is that you can see us work on this as well. So that's kind of an example of what we want to do with replacing. We also want to help the ECharts community grow. That's a big part of our goal. The bigger the community, the better the project makes everyone more effective. So one of the things we've been working on is working on a blog post. This was created a couple months ago, but we're still working on it, hoping to get more drafts this week. But basically having a written version of explaining why we chose ECharts over D3, similar to what this talk is about. So I think the last question to ask is, would ECharts be a good fit for you? Maybe you're doing data visualization, maybe you're thinking about it, maybe that's something on your mind, I'm not sure. I want to tell you that more companies are using ECharts than you think. D3 does have more popularity, but ECharts also has popularity. On the website itself, there are a lot of companies listed. Granted, most of them are Chinese companies, but I've actually personally talked to different engineering managers at different companies that use ECharts internally, but haven't really shared with the world. So GitLab is one of the bigger international companies that's starting to show that we're using ECharts, and I hope other companies start doing the same. And so depending on your use case, it might help you ship faster with ECharts. That low level may not be what you need, at least maybe not now. It's possible that you start with ECharts and move to D3 later on once you've proven your product market. But that's a tool for your tool belt. And if we had to do it all over again at GitLab, we would still pick ECharts. That was the right decision for us. The velocity we gained in 8 months was far greater than we would have at D3. And so with that, I want to thank you for listening. Any questions?
Number 4, run native languages with JVM.
No questions? Okay, well, if you have questions, come find me later. I also have some GitLab stickers that I'm happy to give it to you. Thank you.